So, Michael, yeah, my bad. I screwed up. Last week, we recorded a review of the 2001 Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton version. An hour and a half we talked about it. And that's all gone to waste because I had the wrong mic recording on Audacity, which means my audio was absolutely terrible. So, yeah, we just put that in the bin. So I think it's very appropriate for me to say of myself, damn me all to hell, because that's, a line from the movie, so, I mean, obviously he's talking about apes. In
a way, sorry, I was enjoying letting you just live with the failure and just try to express your contempt for yourself. But what I was going to say is it's appropriate because you are an ape, Luke, a stupid ape for making that mistake. Is that good? Because like apes kind of an insult kind of implies that you're not very good with maybe technology.
Yeah.
In fact, they literally aren't in the film.
Yeah, no.
You are Admiral Thade.
Yeah, General Thade. I am General Thade. Anyway, yes, the Planet of the Apes review will be lost to the sands of time, unfortunately. We'll never know what we thought of that, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I am an idiot. I am a damn stupid, dirty ape.
Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke. And this week we are celebrating the 20-year anniversary of the release of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about The Fellowship of the Ring?
Thank you for specifying it's Peter Jackson's, because we won't want to confuse it with Ralph Bakshi's, would we?
Exactly.
Yeah. I look forward to the day when we review Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Maybe actually I don't look forward to it. I'm not
Soon.
sure. Okay, right. Anyway, so The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is a 2001 epic fantasy adventure film directed by Peter Jackson based on the 1954 novel The Fellowship of the Ring, the first volume of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Yes, of course, this movie was released in 2001, so it's its 20-year anniversary. As we'll see later, it was actually released in December 2001, I believe, but we're doing it a few months earlier just because we've got a lot of movies to talk about. In December, basically this year, everything's been pushed back to there because of COVID. And also, I saw this a couple of weeks ago, the new Amazon Prime series on Lord of the Rings is coming out exactly at this time next year, like early September next year.
Wow.
So yeah, we'll probably do the
Two Towers.
Yeah, the Two Towers at this time next year.
It'll be so topical.
Yes, exactly. The Two Towers this time next year as well. For that, it's that movie's 20-year anniversary. But of course, this is the Fellowship of the Ring review, Michael. And so, The Fellowship of the Ring, directed by Peter Jackson, as you said. The screenplay also was by Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens, based on The Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah, we know that. This movie stars quite a lot of people. Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Liv Tyler, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin, Cate Blanchett, John Rhys Davis. We did a movie of his a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Billy Boyd, Dominic Moynihan, Orlando Bloom, Christopher Lee, Hugo Weaving, Sean Bean, Ian Holm, and Andy Serkis, although he's not in this movie a lot, is he, Andy Serkis?
No,
yeah. I believe that's what they call an ensemble cast. Although I will say this movie made a lot of those actors quite famous when they otherwise wouldn't have been, so is it really an ensemble cast when, the reason why they're so famous is because of the movie they all starred
More like an ensemble past.
Yes, I guess so. Anyway, so this movie was released on the 19th of December 2001 in the United States, and just one day later in New Zealand. Why did they put New Zealand, Michael? There's never...
Yeah, that's bizarre.
I know, it never... And surely, wouldn't it be the... I guess they have to release it one day later in New Zealand because,
it's
of the
different time zone.
Yeah, different time zone, yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so the language is English. Where's the elves?
And Elven.
Yeah. Fucking hell, this Wikipedia page is awful.
That's a missed opportunity too.
I know, right? So the budget, Michael, what was the budget for the Fellowship of the Ring? We do have a number.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, this is an interesting one because I know that obviously, and I guess maybe you do too, that the three films were shot in one continuous shoot, which, is a good time-saving effort. But based on that, I'm kind of like, how did they divide up the money? I'm thinking maybe this was... 80 million.
80. Good guess. It's 93.
Okay.
93 million. And what about the box office? How much did this make?
Oh, a lot. Maybe. I mean, you know what? I mean, is it a huge amount? Like, I think I'm right in saying that The Return of the King got $1 billion. I don't know if this would have got as much, but I feel like if The Return of the King got $1 billion, this must have got a decent amount of the way there. So maybe it made like 700 million.
That's not a decent way there, is it?
So fine, yeah, probably should have gone. I was thinking 750 million, but yeah. I don't know, for some reason I just can't imagine this film making like...
Yeah, even when you know the Return of the King's box office, you guess lower than the actual Fellowship of the Ring, because it is actually 897, so round it up to 900 million. So got 9/10
well,
of
the important thing is, for Two Towers, I would definitely go for 950 million, no matter what.
Well, I don't know, obviously, and we'll find out in the year. We could just click on the Wikipedia page, but I suspect the middle movie would get less. That's always how it tends to go, right? The first, because of the hype, gets the most, and then the middle movie. The
middle one, it's like the middle child.
Yeah, and then the last one, because it's the last one everyone goes to see, gets the most. Or competes with the first at least, and there's a little dip in the middle. But anyway, so that is the box office and the budget for The Fellowship of the Ring. Michael, did you like this movie? You better say yes.
I did, yeah. I like this film. Now, I will say that I am a fan of the source material, and something that I was trying to do this time is really kind of think about what I thought about this film as an adaptation, and based on that, I have a few criticisms, a few areas where I think it could have been better, but overall I did very much like this film. What did you think?
Yeah, I think here's the thing, when you're adapting a novel which a lot of people like, obviously, you would have grown up with these movies, as did I. So we weren't waiting on bated breath. So I hope Peter Jackson doesn't screw this up. The first thing I knew about the Lord of the Rings was these movies. But to be fair, I haven't read the novel either, so I don't know whether the adaptation's good. But yeah, that's the thing. I think a lot of people who perhaps were fans and were waiting to see this adaptation do really like it. I remember the Folding Ideas video on Ralph Bakshi and The Ring. I think it's called Bakshi and The Ring. He talked about how the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings kind of defined how people thought about Lord of the Rings. This is the version. This all makes sense. It's not set in England, it's set in New Zealand, and that works. Literally, New Zealand is like Middle Earth. They have fucking, what's it called, Hobbiton? They have the Hobbit things there. Of course, I think tourism in New Zealand increased dramatically. People were very accepting of this adaptation of Lord of the Rings. There's no backlash at all to what Peter Jackson did. You contrast that with the Hobbit. There's maybe a bit of a difference there. So this is this is an adaptation which many people. It's not really. Of course it's an adaptation, but many people are like, no, this is the Lord of the Rings. This is it. And that's why a lot of people for the upcoming Amazon series are kind of just like, well, why are you doing this? Go on.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, the Amazon thing, I don't know, you just I basically agree with you, but also, I mean, Amazon have recently they had a good run where they were making good films. I remember when we first started off, when we were talking about, started off this podcast talking about Manchester by the Sea, it seemed like Amazon were doing all right, but it seems like the recent things I've seen coming out of Amazon. No, that was Amazon. Oh, right. I remember it was a weird thing, but basically, it seems like recent things I've seen coming out of Amazon have been universally disappointing. So, I say disappointing. I haven't seen them, but I've seen other people saying. Well,
obviously we don't know if it's going to be disappointing. Yeah. But I'm just talking about the general sense. It's this is pointless. We've already have a great adaptation of Lord of the Rings that came out 20 years ago. Why are we doing this again? And so that speaks to just how loved and how appreciated this adaptation is. It's we've done it. There's no need for anything else. But anyway, so let's get into this adaptation of Lord of the Rings. So, Michael, nitpicks, how many do you have?
I have 3 nitpicks and 3 lit picks.
Oh, fuck off. No.
Don't worry, okay, the lit picks are really... Okay, so 2 of the lit picks are really short, and the nitpicks are also pretty short.
I'll go first, because I have 5 nitpicks.
Okay.
And they're all going to be quite quick. The first one is I had to watch the extended version, which... isn't that bad, because of course it's still a good movie, but obviously Dylan on the Pope is Gay, shout out to the Pope is Gay, complained about the fact that he doesn't like long movies, and I don't really mind, but I just think the 3-hour cut is a better cut from this, from what I remember. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 on the extended cut is it's just really long. and that's just like I just like I'm trying to watch it. And I'm like, God, I've still got fucking 50 minutes to go here. But yeah, that's it. Just a small issue, doesn't really affect how I view the film, of course. My next nitpick: Saruman is too similar to Sauron as a name.
Hold on a minute, that's like funny, right? With
Why?
regards to the Bakshi thing.
Oh, why? Why is it funny?
Okay, so basically, there was a whole thing with the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, where halfway through production, the studio executives said that Saruman was too similar to Sauron, so they changed his name to Araman, but it's like inconsistent, and it's one of the most bizarre things in the Ralph Bakshi, and there are a lot of bizarre things in that film, but just like randomly, he's called Saruman sometimes.
I should be a shithead movie executive.
Yes, yeah, they go
on
like,
coke.
but
that is my calling.
The wizard Araman needs to do this, and so that's really funny that you mentioned that.
But here's the thing, like
I get where you're coming
I also like I had these Lord of the Rings like top trumps as a kid.
Yeah.
And I always used to get confused. Again, this is me being like 7 years old.
Yeah,
Of course, this is just a joke, really. I don't think it's too hard. Like, adults should be able to cope with Saruman and Sauron being different. But I was like, Sauron, why are they so similar? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, wait until we get to Eowyn in the second film.
Oh, my God.
Like, the two romantic interests are called Eowyn and Arwen. What the hell was Tolkien thinking?
I know, right? But yeah, at least they're on the same team. At least they're on the same team. They're both the bad guys. Okay, so we can deal with that. My next nitpick: when Arwen takes Frodo, obviously to Rivendell, and they're trying to escape the Nazgul. Why don't they just leave the ring with Aragorn so the Nazgul don't get attracted to him? Because the Nazgul are chasing the ring. You see, you didn't think about that, did you, Michael? You didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, yeah, it would have been. I think. I mean, obviously, like there's a whole shtick about like people being careful about who has the ring, but he could have at least put it in his pocket. Like, I get like the whole thing is, so yeah, on the one hand, like they have a whole thing about like
put it in Sam's pocket.
Position.
Sam seems like a trustworthy guy.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Sam would have been a good shout actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess you can say like, to be fair, they didn't sit down and have a proper strategy things. Maybe they were like too rushed, didn't think about it, but they could have thought about it.
That's literally the first thing I thought of when the Nazgul are chasing him. It's like, well, just fucking leave the ring there. But anyway, so the Eagles, Michael, my next nitpick. Of course, we'll talk about the Eagles if we ever do Return of the King and more, but this one, again, they just save Gandalf. It has to be brought up, and they, get the Eagles to take you to fucking Gondor. Or, no, Aragorn doesn't want the ring at Gondor. Or I don't know whether Gandalf would object to that. But, take the Eagles, fly into Mordor, drop it in the fucking thing. And it's a nitpick I think many people have, talked about, but it's just...
Yeah, it's the classic one.
It's just so in your face. Like, I can't think of a way to not include it. You have to talk about it, unfortunately. And it would be good, actually, if they had, like... maybe this could offset it, but of course this would be creating something new. If there was, like, evil Eagles, like that flew around, like, Mordor. That prevented that from happening. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, but of course that's not in the original Tolkien thing, is it? So you can't do that. The orcs as well. My next nitpick. This is quite funny if you watch it. The orcs when Frodo and Aragorn are having the conversation at the end, where Aragorn's saying, "Yeah, Frodo, you have to go alone. I understand," and Aragorn tells Frodo to run. Like the orcs just like sneak up on them. Like hundreds of orcs are just like, oh, they're just like 10 feet away from Aragorn now. Like nobody heard that. There we go. Yeah, and that's kind of just like, well, you could have them a bit further away and just not right at the...
I kind of thought about that too, actually. Yeah, he does just walk out and it's just like... I mean, it's just weird also because apparently they're like running around and their plan for running around is just to walk in one massive big group. So I guess they must have known, they must have been like, okay, this is how we're going to get Aragorn. We'll just, tiptoe.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, well, yeah, it's poor directing, I guess, because we've had the scene, with Aragorn and Frodo. Okay, now we're on to the scene where Aragorn battles the orcs. Okay, there's no time with him, like the orcs looking for him. Oh, there we go. They're just right there, just ready for him after he's done with Frodo. And also, I do think that Saruman is. I guess this is kind of added to this nitpick, or it could be a sixth. Saruman is very vague. Some might say deliberately vague when talking about the hobbits having something valuable. So of course the orcs take Merry and Pippin and don't bother looking for the ring. Because the hobbits have something valuable to me. Because of course, if Saruman were to say, "Hey, get these hobbits that have the ring," the orcs would look for the ring on the hobbits. Well, there isn't a ring here. Oh well, we've got the wrong hobbits. But Saruman doesn't say that, so they can take. So the orcs can take the two wrong hobbits back to Isengard, and Frodo can leave. So yeah, bit of an issue there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think if it's possible that Saruman wouldn't know that Merry and Pippin are there. I'm trying to.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't know they're there. I don't think he does.
Yeah, I'm just thinking within that context, he might just think like, well, there's only going to be, like, Frodo and maybe Sam there, so just Hobbit will be enough.
Yeah, but also, the ring, like, for all Saruman knows, one of the hobbits could pass the ring to someone else, like Aragorn.
That would be really fun, actually. Wait, I feel like that's literally a film I've seen recently, but yeah, like if they just started like throwing the ring from one person to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a massive game of keep away.
Yeah,
and he looks like he's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, like even if, he's like, he should tell the orcs, get the ring. That's I don't care about the fucking hobbits if they don't have a ring. Right, so that's what he should talk. But again, he's vague, and therefore, they take the wrong hobbits by mistake. Very convenient. So those are my nitpicks, Michael. Give me yours.
Yeah, all right. So mine, this first one I only mentioned because I've been thinking a little bit about rings recently, and I only thought about it recently. But what about ring sizes? Because in this film, you have like the ring passes between like lots of people. First of all, it's on Sauron, then it's on Isildur, then it's obviously on Frodo. Very different sized people, and yet they all apparently have the exact same ring size, such that the ring isn't constantly
are you missing something? I swear, it shrinks. Right? There's when it goes to Isildur off Sauron, it shrinks.
Oh, does it shrink?
Yeah.
Maybe I just That's interesting.
It does. I remember seeing it. It's like, oh, that's how it works. It shrinks. Of course, that makes sense. And how did you not?
That's really interesting. I mean, obviously, like I've seen, it may be that I just never ever. Obviously, I've looked at that many times, and yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have to go back and look at that.
Wow,
not now, but
literally after he chops his hand off, or his finger off, and it comes to him, and it shrinks down in size to fit.
See, that's actually really funny because, to be honest, one of the reasons when I thought about the ring sizes, I was like, well, it's just going to be the kind of thing that they didn't really think about.
No, they did.
But they did. Wow. I mean, it's interesting that I assume like, I'm gonna go back and see like just how. I mean, obviously,
you've been rumbled. You've been rumbled.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Thank God I'm on this, or you would have embarrassed yourself.
I know. Well, I mean, to be fair, you kind of did embarrass. I mean, I'm still embarrassed anyway because you pointed out I'm wrong. But yeah,
I guess so.
That's really interesting that But anyway, okay. So the second one, this is just me being a nerd, so you can't take this one from me. I don't know why Bilbo would say the third age of this world because it's actually the third age of the sun. But there were several ages before that. There was the age of stars and the age of trees and the age of darkness and the age of lamps. Basically, in the way that Tolkien like has the dating, it's like there are different light sources throughout history, and this is just the age of sun. So it's not the third age of this world; it's the third age of the sun. And
okay,
and then the final nitpick is, how can Sam know that Aragorn was staring at them when you can't see his eyes? And I bring that up because he says that guy's been staring at us all day, and then you like cut to him and he's just like, his eyes are completely shadowed, and if anything it looks like he could easily just be asleep. So I don't know how Sam can claim to know that this guy's been staring at them the whole time.
Well, I think they know he's not asleep because he's lifting his mug up to drink.
Well, either way, like to know that somebody's staring at you specifically rather than just looking out across the room. I think it's Give me this one, Luke.
Okay,
I already embarrassed myself. So my lit picks. Okay, this one's actually a length one. But it's a positive one. It's that the credits are 30 minutes, and I say that because I kind of agree with you. Like, I actually like the extended edition. I just think, but I also agree that just in your brain. Well, I mean, no, but the thing is, this is what I'm getting to. That I agree with you that there is a part of your brain that's like, man, I've got a lot of this film left. And with that said, I like the fact that the credits in this film are 30 minutes long. I don't know if you clocked this, but literally like...
No, yeah. 3 hours 20, 30-minute credits.
Yeah. So with that said, it's kind of like, it's really satisfying to think that you've got like, half an hour of the whole film left. And it's like, no, actually, the credits are just so long that you've actually got like, it just feels like you're getting more extra time for
Literally, the first time I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because I was like, it was 3 hours and like Boromir was dying. I'm like, there can't be another fucking 40 minutes after this. What's going on? But no, you got like 30 minutes of credits. So
And I just like that. Like, I always like, I do like when you're kind of like, you're at the end of the film, and even when you're watching a film you enjoy, there's a part of you that always just deep down wants it to be over. Not always, but a lot of the time. So when you see like, oh, actually it's like 10 minutes of credits or things like that, but this was 30 minutes and it was just glorious. Yeah. This one's about a meme, but it's a meme I really enjoy. So Sam has that classic line, "If I take one more step, I'll be further away from home than I've ever been." Of course, when they're walking the farm. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there is a video on YouTube called, well, basically the premise is that every single time, so it's the Lord of the Rings, but every single time Sam takes a step, he says that line.
That's funny.
So it's like he takes one line, it's like, if I take one more step, I'll be further away from home, and takes another step. And it's just really funny to me. And then the final one, and this is another nerd one, it's to do with what Gimli's gift was from Galadriel.
3 strands of hair.
Now, do you know why that...
Because he's a pervert.
Yeah, okay, so it comes from, this is like the most kind of, I think possibly in the entire trilogy, this is the most kind of like subtle hint at the wider lore, and it comes from the fact that in the Silmarillion, there's an Alduin prince called Fëanor, and basically Fëanor, he's a cool guy. No, he's the one who makes the Silmarils, so obviously the book's called the Silmarillion, he makes the Silmarils, he's like a great kind of smith. But his thing is, he's really arrogant. He's a very flawed kind of character. And he's got the hots for Galadriel. And on 3 separate occasions, he asks Galadriel for a strand of her hair. Because he's like, hey, it's me, Fëanor, the really, the best guy. And Galadriel's like, nah, I'm not about that. So basically, it's obviously on the surface, you're like, well, it's just a kind of reference. But I think it's kind of like extra clever because it's like, it shows that she recognized kind of like the humility of Gimli. So, Fëanor obviously was a kind of a craftsman, like a dwarf in many ways, but he was really arrogant and Galadriel wasn't about that. But then she sees Gimli who kind of humbles himself, even though he's kind of like an arrogant kind of person towards elves at the beginning of the film, kind of humbles himself. And she says, you know what, I'm going to reward you with 3 strands of hair. And there we go. I just thought, what a very, but it has to be a lit pick because it's obviously so kind of tangential.
That's like a sitcom thing when, the girl, doesn't go for the arrogant guy instead goes for the nerd. It could be a line in the Big Bang Theory. A storyline in the Big Bang. Yeah, that.
Fëanor's a cool guy.
Yeah, okay.
I think he gets killed by a Balrog.
Anyway, shame for him. Anyway, and let's get into the actual...
plot.
Oh, well, yeah. At first, I want to talk about how influential this movie was, or how big this movie was, or the whole Lord of the Rings. And I'll just talk a bit about this.
Yes.
Because I don't know, it's probably my age more than anything, but I have a nostalgia for the early 2000s. Anything early 2000s.
You love Blink-182.
That was more like the late 90s.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean like early 2000s. And of course...
You like Usher?
Yeah, Usher, yeah. But, I mean, mainly just like movies
Iraq
and
War?
TV. Mainly just, I'm talking about movies and TV stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, this movie, I will say the culture at the time was not great. And that's part of the reason why I like it. There was a lot of just shitty things being produced at this time, the early 2000s. I think about the 90s, how you had a lot of great movies. The early 2000s, I don't think you can really say the same thing. I don't know why that just happens to be the case. But I still like it still. But this movie stands out because this was from the early 2000s. You've got Harry Potter, obviously, with those movies, and this as well. This is the defining thing from the early 2000s, the defining cultural product from the early 2000s, and that is something that is quite weird in a sense because it is quite, if you think about it, epic fantasies. Of course, Game of Thrones have has turned this a bit now. It wouldn't be so weird, but back in the day, the early 2000s, fucking fantasy stuff, being the center of the culture. This novel from 50 years ago, by J.R. Tolkien. It's so weird to think about. But yeah, that was the case, and I have to say, that is quite interesting to me. Lord of the Rings, 2002, everybody knew about Lord of the Rings, which is quite crazy to think about. Was the defining cultural product of this time. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, with fantasy, I guess the issue is that it is incredibly, I feel like there's an idea that fantasy is very kind of unwieldy, because there's so much complex lore and stuff going on, and that's obviously the case of this. I mean, I literally just gave an example of a reference to some complex lore, but I think this film does a good job at kind of negotiating what the average member of the public would be willing to tolerate, and I think that's very clever, and it deserves credit for doing that. And ultimately, I do agree.
That's a good point.
I mean, the thing people say about the Ralph Bakshi films is that they're kind of more companion pieces for people who have read the books. And
that's why you like it so much, don't you?
Well, because I'm a dweeb. But I think it's definitely true in the case of this film that you could watch it without really knowing anything about even having an interest in high fantasy and be like, yes, I'm into this. And obviously they tried to kind of, they replicated it later on with, they tried to replicate it later on with, obviously the classic example is Chronicles of Narnia, and that kind of flopped. So I guess that just shows it's not this film was unique in terms of people watched the Chronicles of Narnia and they're what the fuck? It's a lion that talks? This is nonsense.
But this is the thing, I also read that as a kid, and The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and then they brought out a movie a few years later. It was perfect for me. But I think it's 2006 that movie came out, but Yeah, but with this one, of course, like it's fantasy stuff, and you're right. It is like enough for people to tolerate it, even though. But that's the thing. Yeah, it is weird to think about still with that, and that's good for Peter Jackson. He made these like novels that not a lot of people. Of course, it was popular somewhat, but wasn't massively popular. Again, like who in America had probably heard of J.R. Tolkien before these movies came out? I think a small percentage of the population, and he made it popular. So there you go. The early 2000s. Shout out to that.
It is shocking like that the studio was willing to back this, especially considering the fact that they literally committed to making all 3 films at once. Like it is really interesting, and you'd feel like if you were a studio executive, you wouldn't be like, okay, we're going to commit to making 11 hours of film, for probably like 300, maybe like 250 million total dollars or something like that.
It's probably around 300, I'd assume. Of course it was a big risk, but I think they felt like, we've got some decent actors. Peter Jackson knows what he's doing. Like, let's go for it. And it was a bit of a
and it paid off.
Yeah, it did pay off. Anyway, so. What we talked about last week, Peter Jackson, when we talked about Planet of the Apes, he was like struggling to not get Lord of the Rings cancelled in like 1998. But anyway, so but of course, let's talk about how Peter Jackson did create this. Peter Jackson began working with Christian Rivers to storyboard the series in August 1997, as well as getting Richard Taylor and Weta Workshop, that's someone's name, Weta Workshop, to begin creating his interpretation of Middle-earth. Jackson told them to make Middle-earth as plausible and believable as possible, and to think of it in a historical manner. In November of 1997, Alan Lee and John Ho became the film trilogy's primary conceptual designers, having had previous experience as illustrators for the book and various other tie-ins. Lee worked for the art department, creating places such as Rivendell, Isengard, Moria, and Lothlorien, giving Art Nouveau and geometry influences to the elves and dwarves, respectively. So that's interesting. It's like, of course, there was a lot of work behind the scenes, and that Peter Jackson make it as realistic as possible. Like, there's so much effort being put into this, as you can see.
I feel like when you consider the fact that, like, obviously this film was, as I've already said, like one continuous shoot, I would suspect this film has like a very kind of low shoot time to total production time ratio. Like, I'd imagine there was like a massive, and you kind of already like implied this already, but a massive stretch of pre-production, and then a relatively small, like, compared to everything else, relatively small shoot, and then a massive stretch of post-production just because of the amount of kind of artistry that has to go on in terms of creating these environments.
They started filming, I believe, in August 99 or maybe October 99, something like that. And then, of course, the movie comes out 2 years later. So I imagine they filmed literally for like a year, maybe a year and a half. And then, a year seems more reasonable, and then production for about a year and a bit. And then production for the next couple taking, again, a similar amount of time. Again, just a massive effort for this. But that's basically, we're talking about the whole Lord of the Rings here. Let's get back to the Fellowship of the Ring, Michael, because that, of course, is the only thing we're going to be talking about today in terms of the plot. So, set in Middle-earth, the story tells of the Dark Lord Sauron, who seeks the One Ring, which contains part of his soul in order to return to power. The ring has found its way to the young hobbit Frodo Baggins. Not Chodo Baggins, as was really funny to call it. The fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance as Frodo and his 8 companions, who form the Fellowship of the Ring, begin their journey to Mount Doom in the land of Mordor, the only place where the ring can be destroyed. They're going to Mount Doom, Michael. Very interesting. He comes up talking all these fancy names with Boromir, fucking Loloth and Goth of the fucking forest, and then just Mount Doom. You gotta love Tolkien. So Frodo basically has to carry this ring to take it from the bad guys. Here's the thing, Michael. Is it a MacGuffin device? The one ring to rule them all? Is it just a MacGuffin device? Because we talked about it with Raiders of the Lost Ark, and spoilers, I'm going to say no. Because if the whole point is the MacGuffin, then it isn't like a cheap...
It's not a MacGuffin.
Yeah, then it isn't a cheap plot device, basically, which is what a MacGuffin often is. And obviously, the story isn't really about the ring itself, but the characters' relationship to the ring and how the ring changes them. What do you have to say on the plot, Michael?
I pretty much agree with you that that's why it's not a MacGuffin. And also, I think there's like, because of the amount of lore around it and kind of the amount that it's built up, it's obviously, it's not just we have to find the thing or get the thing. It's like there's a very large amount of backstory to it. And obviously, the film kind of starts off with really diving into that backstory, and kind of by the end of that, you have to be like, well, obviously the purpose of the ring or the kind of significance of the ring isn't just like it's supposed to be, you know, like it's like, oh, you got to use the ring to magically destroy Sauron. It's like there's a lot more attached to it in terms of, like you say, the relationships of the characters, and it already kind of establishes its, I guess, thematic significance in terms of like the desire for power that lots of rulers have.
Yeah,
so yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, it's like alcohol. It exposes yourself, you know. Like yeah, it's like
shows who you truly are.
Yeah, alcohol removes your inhibitions, as it were, and you know you can tell when Boromir drinks a few, he's a bit aggressive, and he's a bit insecure, and like he is when he's around the ring. But yeah, so Jackson, Walsh, and Boyens made numerous changes to the story for the purpose of pacing and character development. Jackson said that his main desire was to make a film focused primarily on Frodo and the ring. The backbone of the story. So yes, that makes sense from what we've said. Of course, you know, it's about the relationships of the ring, how the ring changes someone, how it reveals the character, and yeah, of course, Frodo and the ring. That's what it is mainly about. And that is well, from this, it's a slight difference to the novel at least. Some events from the book are condensed or omitted at the beginning of the film. The time between Gandalf leaving the ring to Frodo, I love this, and returning to reveal its inscription, which is 17 years in the book, is compressed for timing reasons. And we'll get onto a bit of that when we go through that part of the plot, but yeah, I just like that. 17 years to 17 hours. Away. Yeah, it's a lovely difference there. So, of course, we start the movie with an explainer, which I have to say, from my point of view, is very necessary. So, yeah, you have some things to say on this.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually think, so overall, I think it's very obvious that a lot of this stuff could have probably been explained like later on through kind of like dialogue moments. Like I think almost everything that's said could have had like, I think, natural moments in the story where it could have been mentioned otherwise. But I think, considering the fact that a lot of people may not have wanted to watch this film several times over, on a first watch, I think having just one massive moment where it explains everything is very useful. So yeah, and that's probably what you meant when you said it was very useful to you. I will say one thing which I was aware of is that I think that this is an example of where the film is hurt by the fact that they couldn't do The Hobbit first. And I think I even heard that they initially were considering doing The Hobbit first. So of course, as we know, they released The Hobbit later on. But obviously it kind of means that there's more stuff you have to do exposition on here because you have to also explain Bilbo and The Hobbit. So I think it would have been kind of to the advantage of the film if they could have already done The Hobbit and be like, okay, people probably already know about The Hobbit because it's already been out. So we can just either condense the kind of opening exposition even more because we don't have to cover the whole Bilbo stuff, or even maybe expand out, but just to make sure that it's all very kind of clear what's going on. Obviously, that's not really a criticism of this film, but it is something where I'm like, yeah, I can see how, like, once you've especially know about kind of the whole thing going with The Hobbit, having it explained to you is a bit redundant.
Yeah,
pretty minor criticism.
But that's the thing, like, when we're talking about, you know, the elves, like, the rings, like 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for the men. I don't know why they chose that number. I'm sure maybe you know, but
I do know, actually.
I don't care.
I know for the 7, because there were 7 kingdoms of the dwarves.
And there's probably like 9 men who are really like in charge, like Chads, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then of course Sauron builds a super ring, you know, like the Super League for, you know, for those clubs that wanted to form that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Sauron builds, you know, because he doesn't care about the domestic.
But it's less evil than the Super League.
Yeah, exactly. We have that setup, of course, with the ring being picked up by, you know, the hobbits, and, you know, that is all part of the setup because, you know, like we said, the movie, it's not about Sauron and the ring itself. You know, it's about the quest, the adventure. It's about the characters, you know, their development. So, yeah, that's why I'm fine they don't spend too long in the backstory because, you know, you need to know about it, but, you know, it's a case of we can move past it. And interestingly, the prologue, this is from Wikipedia, condenses Tolkien's backstory in which the last Alliance's 7-year siege of the Barad-dûr in a single battle, is a single battle instead of a 7-year siege, where Sauron is shown to explode, though Tolkien only said his spirit flees. So yeah, some differences there. But again, I'm fine with that. Just like, okay, we have the setup. It takes 5 minutes. Then we can move on to the actual story, which brings us on to Sauron, Michael, because you wanted to talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, there is one thing, which is kind of how intimidating he is when he is kind of set up at the beginning, which I would say is done well. Although I do have one quibble, which is I'm not sure if it should be done that well because, and this is something I find interesting about kind of this film, although I'm not sure, I think to an extent this film does kind of communicate it, but I think it's something which the film maybe could have communicated more, which is that the Sauron we see in this film is basically a cripple. And what I mean by that is that, as you know, Sauron originally was in charge of Angband under the leadership of Melkor. But basically, the point is that Sauron, I think you could say, has been defeated in like a very much kind of destroyed sense, like 3 or possibly even 4 times before. So obviously we see him get destroyed by Isildur and like explodes, but he also gets like basically washed away in Numenor, and he pours his soul out into the ring. Basically, like Sauron's actually been like kind of whittled down into almost nothing. And this leads me to a radical theory, which is, and I think it's interesting because you were talking about the ring as a MacGuffin, and I was thinking about this. This is my theory, okay? So generally speaking, the Lord of the Rings, the question becomes, who is the Lord of the Rings? And it's generally taken as referring to Sauron. But I subscribe to a theory that actually the Lord of the Rings is referring to the ring itself, the one ring to rule them all. And this leads me to my even more crazy theory, which I just think is interesting to have in the back of my mind, which is that Sauron, being as hollowed out and empty and weak and crippled as he is, I think that if he got the ring, he wouldn't master the ring would master him. So I actually think the ring, and I think there's like a message there about how Sauron, he's like obsessed with power, and he's also a very spiteful person. Like several of the times that he dies, because he's died several times before, as I said, it's literally just been like in kind of suicide missions out of pure spite and revenge. So he basically destroys himself in his angry quest for revenge against the people who wronged him and stuff like that. And I think a very fitting end to that would be that by the end of it, the thing he's created, the ring, is more powerful than him. And I think that's kind of evidenced by this film. Like Sauron, as you kind of pointed out, isn't really like a main player in this film. And even though he gets this big kind of introduction, he actually doesn't really matter that much in the film compared to the ring.
Well, surely then if Sauron, your theory that, okay, the Lord of the Rings is actually the ring and Sauron is corrupted and couldn't control the ring, surely if that was the case, what I'm saying is that movie does not do this, because then surely Sauron would be in this movie, and in the whole trilogy more. Because he's only in the trilogy a bit. Again, he's just a big threat. To defeat.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, yeah. So I guess what you're saying is, yeah, it could have been built up more. And yeah, I mean, to be honest,
I don't think that's what Peter Jackson was going.
No,
for.
yeah. I don't think, to be honest, I don't think it's like, I don't think there's that much textual evidence for it in the film itself. I think it's one of those things where, like, again, it's something which I think is interesting, and I think it's like supported by the wider text. And for that reason, I guess what I'm saying also is like,
the Fellowship.
I'd like to see.
Well, you didn't.
I'd like to
get
have
to
seen
see
it more.
You didn't.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is, I'm kind of saying it as like a thing, like in terms of Sauron as a character. I guess one of the criticisms. So George R. R. Martin famously has said like that Sauron is kind of just like a generic Dark Lord, and there's not actually that much that's that interesting about Sauron. And I think you'd probably agree. Like Sauron, he's not like an interesting character. Yeah. And what I'm saying is, therefore, you could say it would be a positive if there was something else interesting about Sauron, and if that thing which I think.
You wish they could have done more with Sauron's character.
Yeah.
Okay.
But ultimately, it doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, well, I think having a villain have a little bit more to him would be a nice thing. But overall, certainly.
Yeah, it's fine, because like he's not like he's doesn't have a character. He's just like the big fucking eye who's very scary. Like he's just so scary. Yeah, again, it's all about the characters, and this is just like the obstacles that they have to overcome.
Yes,
that sets up getting to know the characters. So anyway, let's talk about the Shire now, Michael. The Shire.
It's beautiful.
The home that Tolkien desires more than anything, I think.
What a trad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect, idyllic place. How does... Who's talking? I think it's Bilbo who's talking. He says, change is slow. Yeah. You've got the woods and the fields. Tolkien really was the precursor to Ted Kaczynski with his whole industrial society and its future. I mean, the difference is Tolkien, of course, wrote best-selling books, while Kaczynski blew up like a dozen people to make his point.
Yeah.
But apart from that, they are pretty similar in their hatred for everything technological. And they just want to go back to these times, where it was nice and simple, with the agriculture, and no such thing as electricity existed, or like or industry in general. What do you think of that, Michael?
I mean, I think it's really interesting because, like, I think definitely for me and for a lot of people, like, you would think with this film, obviously, like, as a lot of fantasy is kind of like escapism. The main people would be like, oh, I wish I was going off on adventures and, mountains and battling, all of these monsters and stuff like that. Wouldn't that be exciting?
But as Frodo shows us, it's not exciting and takes quite a toll as he talks to Bilbo.
Yes,
so,
yeah, exactly.
Go on.
Well, yeah, and what I was going to say, you've correctly anticipated my thoughts, which is I think for a lot of people actually, when they watch these films, the main thing they're thinking in terms of escapism is thinking, man, I wish I lived in the Shire. I wish I could just sit in kind of like my nice oak-lined living room in my big comfy armchair by the fire, reading a book. And obviously, we can think about how practically actually like the very thing we're doing right now would not be possible in the world of the Shire. And indeed you couldn't watch the porn of the rings. So yeah, you can think about how if you're being sensible that actually there's a lot of good things to kind of modern society, but I think that's why it's kind of like
after I say porn.
But I think but that's why I think it's kind of like it works as escapism, because it's kind of like the idea of who wouldn't like and I know obviously it's kind of, I mean that's why like Hobbiton in New Zealand is kind of so successful. It didn't make horrible black dark Mordor as like a little getaway place. They made the Shire because that's where everyone wants to go, and it's kind of like if you could actually go to the Shire and like live there, if like you had Center Parks but it was like the Shire instead, I feel like people would be so on board of that, because it's just like that idea of this society is so nice. And to be honest, yeah, I really enjoy the beginning because it is just a lot of fun. Like, and have a little party. You have Bilbo telling his story to the little kids. And yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like in terms of escapism, it's probably the best part of the whole series.
It's like a communist commune. That's what it is. Yeah, we can go back to primitive. Where everyone just could get along. No fucking dirty industry and capitalists. Yeah, all of that shit. And I think of course the thing with Tolkien, he had his opinions, but he never actually lived in that time. At least Ted Kaczynski actually fucking put himself in the middle of a fucking forest. Yeah, I didn't like. He actually was committed to his beliefs, unlike Tolkien. Tolkien's a hack fraud. I think we can determine from that. But yeah, like people don't. People like technology. People like playing.
Yeah, I think Tolkien was basically just a massive NIMBY. Like, I get the impression Tolkien was like, he probably enjoyed many aspects of living in modern society. It was just like, oh man, I think literally, I remember hearing that like Tolkien wrote one time that something that kind of inspired almost like his tension in Lord of the Rings, or like kind of the bad guys in Lord of the Rings, is that there was an old watermill near where he lived, which, being a watermill, I guess was kind of functionally useless, but it was like torn down and replaced with a factory. And he was like, man, that really sucks. I really liked that old watermill.
Oh no, oh dear, wow, a watermill's gone, wow.
I know, yeah. But I mean, that's the thing, like, I guess that's
how
a
do you
problem.
get your cotton to wear your clothes, Tolkien?
I know, yeah, that's so true, yeah.
Anyway, so we'll get onto the fact that Bilbo, of course, leaves and therefore leaves the ring behind. Gandalf then, of course, realizes it's the one ring to rule them all, and he's scared since he realizes that Sauron has returned and the ring is calling its master.
No, Sauron has returned.
Okay,
I mean, I tell you what.
Well, I just want to make a point, Michael.
That's fine.
Why?
I'll let you.
Why now? And of course, this is different in the novel because, as we said before, it's 17 years between when Frodo. When Gandalf gets back to Frodo, so but of course this happens quite instantly in the actual movie. Like as soon as Frodo gets the ring, Sauron wants it back, and Sauron's sending the Nazgul. Is it because Bilbo put on the ring, and that triggered it? Well, that doesn't make sense, As has happened plenty of times in the last 2,000 years, the ring has been put on. What action actually triggers this story, this whole Lord of the Rings trilogy? I think it's pretty crucial. Is it Gandalf touches the ring and the ring is like, oh shit, this fucker Gandalf is going to destroy me? Well, playtime is over, I guess. I've had my fun. Time to call Sauron and get me back to him, which I think is stupid, but then it doesn't really make sense because Gandalf, if he calls the whole thing, why were they already torturing Gollum, etc., etc.? I mean, I don't get. This is quite important. This is the start of your epic story, and it just seems Sauron wanted the ring at this point, and the ring wanted to go back to Sauron because it's the time when Bilbo left, and now Frodo has it. Like nothing triggered it, according to Saruman as well. Like Sauron, he says Sauron is amassing evil and building up his forces over time. So it just seems it's a coincidence. As soon as Frodo gets the ring, Sauron wants it. Wow, what a big coincidence, eh?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I agree with you. The kind of connection between Frodo getting the ring and Sauron wanting it, which I mean is obviously what you're pointing at, is completely arbitrary. Obviously, like it kind of makes sense. So yeah, on the grander scale, it kind of makes sense because obviously, like you're talking, obviously Bilbo only gets the ring from Gollum. Like I can't think about the exact timing of it, but I think it'll be
probably
like 60
years.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, so 60 years ago. And at that time, I mean, you have the idea that like Sauron and the ring are linked, so it kind of makes sense that Sauron was also rising up around that time, because you can be like, well, that's when. In fact, actually, there's a whole thing about how the ring basically could have escaped from Gollum almost at any time. So the fact it escaped then wasn't really coincidental, because it's not hard to fall off somebody's finger. So yeah, basically that aspect would make sense. But yeah, I agree with you that the fact that it happened to be an exact same day, and especially since there's a very kind of split second aspect to it, where it's like the implication is that if Frodo had like left kind of the next day, the riders would have got there and captured him. So he had to leave at the exact right day to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's I think ultimately that's a case of Peter Jackson wanted to give it more tension, but obviously it makes it less coherent.
Bilbo's birthday was a week later, so Gandalf doesn't arrive until a week later, and so the Nazgul just show up at Bilbo's house, they kill him, they take the ring, and oh, look at that, Middle Earth's done. Thank God Bilbo's birthday was before this certain date in the last 2,000 years. And again, it's just it's just a bit of a shitty. You got to do a better job on that. I'm sorry, I triggered this whole story. Anyway, so of course Gandalf, he wants to find out what's going on with this ring. So the hobbits, Sam and Frodo, they set off on their journey, and he goes to Saruman.
Yes.
And I have to say, I mean, I don't know if it's a twist really, because you haven't seen Saruman before this point, but yeah, I like it.
It's obvious he's... Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say it's obvious he's evil.
No, I mean, it's obvious it's evil looking back, but, I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like, yeah, it's a nice twist early on in the story to get you invested. That's all I have to say on that, basically.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I got a few things to say about Saruman, because I think he's interesting, but one of the things, I mean, this actually, it's funny because we were talking about, this works quite well, because we're talking about kind of like Tolkien's whole theme thing, and Saruman actually probably gets the closest to encapsulating Tolkien's theme, in that obviously you see early on that his tower is surrounded by like gardens and trees and orchards and stuff like that, and then he becomes evil, and what does he do? He tears down all the trees. I tell you what, if there was a watermill near Saruman, oh, there we go, the name's obviously similar. If there was a watermill near Saruman, it wouldn't last a day. That's the kind of, so yeah, I think you can see that kind of theme of like what used to be kind of pretty and green and nice and like tranquil, then becomes just like dark and muddy and flaming and industrial.
Well, the one of the orcs has a line, these roots run deep.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think the thematic implication of that line is, hey, this wildlife, this nature has been around for like literally thousands upon thousands of years. This is, you can't just tear it up. But Saruman's like, nah, tear it the fuck up. I don't give a shit. Throw it all in the fucking massive hole that we've dug somehow, and there you go. And yeah, just absolutely no care for the environment.
Yeah, I will actually say it's kind of like it's never really clear what the relationship is between what Saruman's doing and the army he's creating, because it's just like, oh, if you cut down a lot of trees and build a hole, then somehow out of that you get a massive army. And I've always found that kind of funny.
Just looks dark.
Yeah.
It's a cool scene though when he's building the orc army. It's a cool scene. I like it. With the music and the camera panning down. I like it.
And then he explains obviously that the orc used to be elves. That's fun. I have an adaptive decision I'd like to know your opinion on. Basically, so in the books, it's left, I was going to say ambiguous, to be honest, it's more like clear the other way, that Saruman isn't really friends with Sauron in any meaningful sense, and basically kind of just, like, Saruman's completely out for himself. There's a bit in the books, which isn't in the films, which is that when the Ringwraiths are looking for the Shire, they go to ask, like, Saruman if he knows where it is, and Saruman's like, no, and, like, sends them in the opposite direction. And obviously it kind of shows you that Saruman is basically, and it's kind of, like, explained elsewhere, that Saruman doesn't really want Sauron to find a ring. He wants to just kind of, like, form an alliance with Sauron to kind of take out his enemies in Rohan, so that he can kind of get the ring for himself. So in this version, it seems like Saruman is just presented as more just, like, on board with Sauron.
Yeah, no, well, obviously, yeah, because there's in that scene. I think that would add, maybe it would make things a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Because he's like the 8th most important character in this movie. And so you're adding that on, like, and this would have to stretch throughout the 3 movies, and you have individual scenes of him doing stuff to, get that across. Maybe Peter Jackson just thought, like, nah, it's too much. He's already, like, he's the second in command to Sauron. And that's all we need.
Oh, and actually, sorry, another thing about that is, of course, as we know, Sauron was initially a lieutenant to Melkor, the OG Dark Lord. So, it would make sense that Sauron would be like, hey, if I'm an ally. But no, yeah, okay, actually, while we're talking about Gandalf and Saruman, actually, one other thing about Gandalf first, just about Gandalf and the ring, because one of the things I like, it's one of my favourite little scenes, is where he goes to Frodo to try and like find out whether or not the ring is, the one true ring, and he obviously knows that a message will appear on it in the fire. So he throws it in the fire and he gives it to Frodo, and he's like, "Did you see anything?" He's like, "Fine." He's like, "Oh, it's nothing." And then you like see Gandalf have like a look of relief on his face.
Yes.
And then Frodo's like, "Wait, there's markings." And then suddenly he's just like his face just becomes like, "Oh shit!" And it's kind of like, I really like that moment because it just shows like how serious this is,
No, it's
even
a great
from like
moment.
Gandalf's perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, from that positive, I just want to say, the fight between Saruman and Gandalf, you could say that it kind of is really hard not to make you think about like, what is the deal with the magic in this film, because it's kind of just like I guess it's kind of like, it's interesting in that you're sort of like, well, I guess it looks really weird, like just throwing each other around. But I guess like, well, I mean, I guess if you have this kind of like non-physical kind of almost spiritual magic, then it would just look kind of weird. But yeah, it does just kind of like, this isn't, so there's an idea in fantasy, it's like a difference between what's called a hard magic system and a soft magic system. And a hard magic system is like a kind of system where it's like the rules are very clearly laid out. So it's like, if you have this particular item, you can do this, and like it's very clear.
And this
kind of
is
like
soft.
Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon. Yeah, this is soft. This is just like, they have staffs and they can just go, and it's like, yeah, there's no clear idea of what it is that they can actually kind of do. Next thing you know, they can use moths to summon eagles and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, overall, I would say, like, I think it's kind of true that just having maybe like a slightly more coherent magic system would make kind of scenes like that where Saruman and Gandalf are fighting a little like more kind of engaging, because as things stand, it's like you're just watching, just like, okay, yeah, they're just throwing each other around.
It's fine though. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. They can throw each other around. You get the gist. It goes on for like 30 seconds. It's all good. Anyway, I think we should now talk about the Nazgul. Because of course, these hobbits, they're leaving the Shire. They're coming up against small threats first, I think, and that's nice in a story like that with the Nazgul. It's like, oh, will the hobbits make it to the ferry across the river? Yeah. Like, hold
on a minute, you're forgetting about the massive threat they encounter first.
Oh, what's that?
Farmer Maggot.
Oh, shut up.
I have a criticism about Farmer Maggot just for a second. Basically, I was going to put it as a nitpick, but then it annoyed me a bit more, so I'll mention it just now, very briefly. Sam knows who Farmer Maggot is, and yet it's considerably earlier on that he claims that he's never been this far away from home. So it's like there's, he says, I've never been this far away from home. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I guess that's it. But yeah, it just seems like he really seems to know. Like, it's like Farmer Maggot's a guy he really knows, and yet.
Does he really know him? Oh, I see.
Well, I know. It's just like, you've been at Farmer Maggot's. Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Sam is in a relationship with Farmer Maggot.
Well, he wouldn't be called Farmer Maggot then, would he?
Yeah, he'd be called Farmer.
Beginning with an F.
Worm. Oh.
Okay. Right. So that's a big laugh. Right. So yeah. Okay. That's another Farmer Maggot. Onto the Nazgul. They make it to the little ferry across the river, and I like that. You consider like the end of the movie when they're battling literally the dark forces of evil, and outside like Sauron's fucking tower.
Yeah.
And this, will he make it across the ferry? Oh yes, I like that, the little start of the story.
Yeah.
And how it balloons into this big thing encompassing the whole of Middle Earth. And if the Nazgul just got Frodo, then it would be over. And yeah, they still have they still have the fire at night when the Nazgul are looking for them, because they're not used to this. They're they're getting used to that. They're still
the Nazgul are like the tutorial.
Yeah, they're still getting used to like being hunted. So yeah, it makes these little like challenges at the start. Yeah, I do like that. You anything to say on the Nazgul itself?
No, yeah. I mean, I pretty much. Well, one thing I was going to say is like, it's kind of weird at the kind of like after like the first encounter, it almost becomes like this weird hide and seek thing where it's just like they're kind of like hiding around, and I just think like, how long are the Nazgul? Like, it makes the Nazgul look a little bit incompetent. They're like looking for quite as long as they are, and then it's like nighttime.
They are incompetent because Aragorn just kind of easily beats them.
I know, yeah. It's a weird thing because obviously, you think like, well, this is the other thing though. The Nazgul, or Black Riders as they're called kind of at this point because they're disguised as riders in black. They are kind of scary, but. Just by dint of like, if you saw one of them coming towards you in a dark alley, you'd be like, okay, that's pretty scary. But yeah, I think overall they're not that intimidating.
I mean, but that's the thing. They're a good thing to start off with. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly,
it's a nice, they're kind of scary, but it's a nice thing to start off with for these hobbits, going on this big adventure. Anyway, so Aragorn, of course, is at the Prancing Pony.
Yes.
And he shows up to save them as Gandalf isn't there, as he's being thrown around by Saruman, and I just have to ask. I was hoping you could answer this. I don't want to put this in
Okay.
nitpick. Like, why is he there? How did he know they'd be there?
Um,
Because I get there's a lot of people who are called to Rivendell because it's the Fellowship
Yeah.
of the Ring, so everyone's called to Rivendell, and Aragorn
Yeah.
would be one of those people. But how come he's at the Prancing Pony?
So I should clarify, like, while I have read the books, I will admit that, like, there are many instances where it's possible that somebody who, like, I'm not actually, like, you won't be surprised to know that there are more obsessive fans than me, but I'm 99% sure that it's established in the books that Aragorn is actually supposed to be meeting Gandalf as well.
Okay,
There's
and
like a thing
Gandalf
in the books.
just
It's something to do with
didn't
like,
tell
well, yeah,
Frodo.
it's something. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. Well, one of the things about Gandalf, which you can't help but notice about him, is that he can often be very just a bit hard to work out. Really, you wouldn't want to be dating him, would you? But no, yeah. The thing is, like, there's a thing about like there's a letter, and it's like a letter which was given to the innkeeper, and the letter says something like that. It's like in some way the letter proves. I can't remember the context, but the letter proves that Gandalf and Aragorn are friends. Which obviously, they skipped out, which I think is fair enough. But I think that also kind of established why it is that he's waiting to meet him there. But yeah, basically, I mean, it's also entirely possible that he's just a drunk and he just hangs out there all the time.
Okay, I mean, I think the other if Gandalf just said, hey, to Frodo, like a one-liner when he's leaving, and oh yes, I'll meet you at the Prancing Pony, and I also might have a friend there. Something like that.
Yeah,
that would make it
sense,
a lot easier. But anyway,
Yeah.
so Aragorn, of course, saves them, and it is very like a RPG kind of thing, like a mysterious guy you meet at a tavern, like assists you on your journey.
Yeah, especially a little speech bubble.
Yeah, exactly. And you had a few things to say about Aragorn, didn't you?
Yeah, just basically, I'm going to talk about Ralph Bakshi's version for a bit. It's better. No, I mean, the thing is, like, so John Hurt's performance as Aragorn in the Ralph Bakshi version is very well received, and I feel like, I don't know why, there's something about this guy. He just feels a little bit too well spoken to me, because the whole thing is, like, in the kind of books, and also I'd argue the Ralph Bakshi version, when you first meet Aragorn, he comes across as just like really kind of like rough and just like actually a ranger, because the whole thing is he's a ranger of the north, and it's like the twist that he's actually the heir to the throne of the most powerful kingdom of men ever. Is supposed to be a big thing, because you're like, oh, this scruffy old ranger from the north, but I don't know why, it's just something about him. He just always speaks with kind of like this soft like tone, as if he always understands things and he's on a greater plane of existence. And I just feel like I just felt like it could have been a little bit more kind of like, they could have leaned a bit more into, he's just a scruffy old ranger from the north, and then when you find out, oh, he's not just a scruffy old ranger from the north, it would feel like a big thing. Because I always remember, like, this is jumping ahead, but in the third one, Elrond's like, put aside the ranger, become a king. And it's like, he's never really been acting like just some old ranger from the north. He's always been acting a bit like a king. So yeah, overall, I think Aragorn, just that specific aspect of his character could have been lent into a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. I didn't really consider it, the whole thing about Aragorn, being more sophisticated than he should seem. Because, when he's an actual king, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He seems like a guy who would be.
Yeah.
Not a rough ranger, but of course Aragorn meets Arwen, his fucking fiancée.
His bird.
Yeah, I don't know what the relationships are in this movie specifically, but yeah, he meets her. And again, it's quite interesting, the whole decision Arwen has to make, whether to live immortal life, immortal, all of that shit. Tell us about that, Michael.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because obviously, like, in a way, it's almost like an issue that comes from like the characters kind of almost being like realistic, in the sense of, when I say realistic, I mean the fact that they live a life outside of the context or the confines of the story, which is like good in a way, because you're like, oh yeah, it makes them feel like kind of real. But obviously it means that the romance stuff, obviously we don't see these characters fall in love. Instead, we're just told they have fallen in love, and of course that makes sense because Aragorn has been ranging around these parts for a very long time. It would kind of make sense that he'd get to know people, he'd hang out in Rivendell, and that Arwen might fall in love with him. But obviously it's something which happens in the background, so you kind of I think it's definitely, you can't really give the film credit for like showing you how the characters fell in love, because obviously you don't see that. But I think you can be like, well, just accept that they are. It's not to, if you have a film about a married couple, you can't say like, well, they didn't show us them falling in love. I think the only issue here is because it's kind of like the reality of their love is kind of a central kind of aspect in that obviously tension you mentioned about whether or not she wants to choose a mortal life. It's kind of like, it makes you maybe a bit more aware of the fact that you don't really know why these two people are in love. You're not really that kind of invested in the reality of their love. You're just like, well, okay, apparently they're in love. But again, I think that was kind of just inevitable. Like, I don't think there's kind of a solution there. I just think it's an inherent problem with the structure.
You can cut Arwen out.
You can cut Arwen out. Indeed, Ralph Bakshi did.
That was a good reference there from me.
Yeah,
because I definitely knew that.
But the funny thing is actually what Ralph Bakshi doesn't cut out is so obviously Aragorn explains the story of Beren and Luthien, which I believe you're aware is.
It'd be funny if Ralph Bakshi cut out all the women.
To be fair, actually, he kind of does because Eowyn is in it, but so obviously this is in the second film, but she doesn't have any lines, so that's a bit awkward. But yeah, basically,
what you mean the second? I thought Bakshi only did one film.
Well, sorry, what I mean is so
the
it's with reference to the second. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
Anyway, but basically, Aragorn does sing, of course, about Beren and Luthien, and as we know, they were the two. I believe the story is that Beren was a mortal man and Luthien was an elf, and Thingol tasked Beren with capturing a Silmaril from the crown of Melkor, and then basically Luthien helps him. It's a really great story. They sneak into Angband, and the funny thing is that once they give the Silmaril to Thingol, he decides to enlist the help of the dwarves to assist him in turning it into a jewel or a kind of crown. But once they do that, the dwarves become jealous of it and demand it for themselves, and this then leads to a fight which ultimately results in the sacking of Doriath, which leads to the long-standing conflict between dwarves and elves. So that's going to be relevant later.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is that obviously the story there is that Luthien wants to hang out with Beren, wants to marry him, and has to make the exact same choice. So there we go, a good old thematic parallel.
Yeah, it rhymes, basically.
Yes, it's like, the only thing that was rhyming is I vomited in stanzas.
Okay, so let's get on to Rivendell now, Michael, because we end up in Rivendell, and of course this is the question once Frodo gets there. What to do about this ring? What do we do about this ring? And Mr. Smith from the Matrix, says he can't. What is actually called?
Elrond.
Okay. He says the ring can't stay in Rivendell, as his elves are leaving these shores to go wherever the fuck they go. And
yes.
Which again, I have to say, happens to be very convenient for the plot. It means Frodo has to carry this ring, of course, to Mount Doom. This all-powerful threat has arisen in Sauron and, wanting the ring back, just as we were leaving. So I guess we're going to have to see some really cool fights and get a quest out of this, when it could have been kept and defended at Rivendell, like, forever, but, that just can't happen because we're leaving. Again, seems like quite a nice coincidence for the story, Michael.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say on the subject of the fact they have to go off on this way, it's kind of convenient they did, because it's always really quaint in hindsight to think about the fact that Frodo, because when he says like the line, "Oh, my own adventure turned out to be that different," like at that point he thinks that this is his adventure. His adventure was just taking the ring to Rivendell. Yes. And I've always found that like really funny to know like if that really was all it was compared to what it actually ends up being.
Oh well,
but yeah,
that's what I was going to talk about next with Frodo.
Oh wait, yeah. Okay, that's really great.
Well, that's the thing.
Talk about it now.
Yeah, I mean Frodo. I put down like Frodo has had his little adventure. He is ready to come home. Like he has dreamt of doing what his uncle did, and then he actually does it. And he's like, "Nah, I'll just go back to the Shire." And Gandalf says he should go home. Clearly it's not the best thing to continue. Yet he persists, Michael. Yet he persists. But it's good to like ground his character. It's like obviously there's that meme from the fucking Hobbit where Bilbo's going, "I'm going on an adventure." And I'm sure Frodo doesn't say that in this movie.
No, yeah.
But you get the sense it's kind of like that with him and Sam. Like, I'm going on an adventure, and then he actually does it, and it's like, I'm done now. I'm good to go home, back to the Shire. But of course, he has to keep going, doesn't he? And that's why his character is so great, because it does, like I say, it grounds his character, makes him seem realistic. He's like, nah, I'm done. But he has to keep going, and he does. Basically, his previous comments make it known that, it is a sacrifice when he offers to take the ring. Like, he's not gallivanting off. There is a burden to bear, and it's therefore a heroic thing to do, and he's not doing it for glory or anything like that. So yeah, that's something I want to point out with Frodo, which I like.
No, yeah, I mean, I do really appreciate kind of the subtle difference between the protagonists in like The Hobbit compared to Lord of the Rings. So obviously in Hobbit, it's that Bilbo initially doesn't want to go on an adventure. Then he kind of changes his mind. He's like, actually, I will go on an adventure. And then obviously kind of like is constantly second guessing himself until eventually he ends up like actually enjoying it. And of course, going on to tell children about his stories and exciting them with all of it. Whereas of course Frodo, conversely, has, grown up the idea of going on an adventure. His initial inclination is, going on an adventure would be good, which is kind of the opposite to Bilbo. But then he goes on a little bit of an adventure and he's like, actually, this was pretty rough. I'm not sure about this. And yeah, obviously, then he's kind of forced into going on an adventure, but in like a very different way to how Bilbo is. Bilbo's kind of forced into it because Gandalf's like, come on, Bilbo, come on, you know you want to. Whereas in this case, it's more like Frodo realizes just the gravity of the situation. And I think, yeah, it does work.
And that works because
really
of the fucking the threat. You need to have a character realize the gravity of the situation.
Yeah.
It just makes things more intriguing, I guess, interesting. You get more engaged with it if your character is like this because it's more realistic as to how it would be. Yeah.
I mean, I will say, by the way, just on the subject of the threat, that just regarding the Rivendell thing, it's probably true that even if they weren't leaving, they wouldn't be able to withstand like a full-on assault. Considering like when you look at the later battles that happen, I think, you know, obviously like elves have some decent magic and stuff, but it's definitely true that like, you know, they couldn't just keep it there forever.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't keep it there forever, but you know, they could
have given them like a little break.
They'd give it a pretty good go. You know, I don't know, maybe sending a little hobbit off to put it in Mount Doom. You know what? 50-50. Well, which is the best choice? Anyway, so of course we now get onto the actual Fellowship of the Ring, well, the formation of the Fellowship of the Ring, and the discussion. And you know, I like how, you know, obviously, you know, Sean Bean is there as a Boromir. He's making the argument that, you know, Gondor is defending Middle-earth from Mordor forever. We need the ring. You know, let's use it. His people are dying. And, you know, of course it comes from a selfish place, but it's like he's making that point. Yeah. And, of course, you know, Gimli just fucking tries to kill it or destroy it with his fucking axe, which is funny. But, yeah, it's like, yeah, there is some kind of political talk about what's going on, but it doesn't really get too far. But I do like the aspect of, you know, that Frodo, he's the innocent character who was just concerned with doing the right thing. All this arguing, he's the one that steps up, and he's the only one that can carry the ring because of his lack of ego, basically. Yes, and that's a key thematic thing, of course, as you talk about power and all of that. And
Kanye West would be a terrible ring bearer.
Oh, fucking Kanye West with the ring, Christ on a bike, Donald Trump with the ring, power ranking the people who you would not want to be in Frodo's position. Kanye West and Donald Trump are at the top of that. But yeah, there is an argument, and I'm going to make this argument, Michael, to be made that the whole Fellowship of the Ring thing seems quite slapdash, all in all. Like, it takes 5 minutes to decide. Nobody questions Frodo taking the ring, you know, although, like we say, thematically it makes sense because, you know, he doesn't have as big an ego. He's the innocent one, just concerned with doing the right thing. But obviously for them, you know, he's a fucking small hobbit. Is that wise? And then, of course, all the other hobbits join in, and obviously, you know,
and it's like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah. Pippin is joking around, you know, like, where are we going? But like, for real, like, if someone said that, would you be like, it's probably best if you don't go? I mean, it doesn't seem right to take these little hobbits on an arduous journey. You know, it would be good if we just got a little bit of pushback, like Boromir saying, hey, I don't know if you should come, like, this is going to be dangerous, and Frodo could say, no, I want them alongside me, they're my friends, they can help me. You know, that'd be a good thing to do. Like, more realistic if Frodo has to step in and defend Pippin and Merry going on that trip.
I tell you what, though, this is the good defense of them. Merry and Pippin, pretty good comic relief characters.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah, yes, there we go. I mean, I do agree with you. I think I remember seeing a video like a while ago. It was kind of just like a video essay thing that came up on my thing. I was like, oh, watch that. And it was basically like arguing that kind of the protagonists in Lord of the Rings do come across as a bit like, not incompetent exactly, but very much kind of like they're just winging it. And that is like, as you go through it, there are definitely elements where you're like, okay, so like this wasn't their plan, but boy, did things just happen to work out for them. Like, yeah, I've always...
well, this is the perfect example. It's 5 minutes. Yeah. 5 minutes to discuss what to do about this all-powerful threat that could end Middle-earth. Okay, this hobbit can take it. Okay.
I know, yeah. And it is funny, because obviously, like, I mean, if Merry and Pippin hadn't been there, it's probably a lot more likely that the Uruk-hai would have pursued Frodo and Sam. And obviously, for example, there's the fact that if Aragorn hadn't kind of decided to pursue Merry and Pippin, he wouldn't have ever gone to Gondor and defended them, and he wouldn't have ever been able to march the army to the Black Gates and things like that. It's kind of like all of these weird things that seemingly just happened because of incompetence.
Nah, but then you have to mistakes. Also... Well, here's my counter to that. It would be better not to bring Merry and Pippin on. Merry and Pippin.
Merry and Pippin.
Because, of course, which is the one that throws the skeleton down the well.
Pippin.
Yeah, Pippin. So
yeah, he would have done that.
Yeah, Pippin does that. If he's not there, that doesn't happen. But you can say, well, another character could have done that. But like when they're going over the mountains, when Saruman is casting his spell that is causing the avalanche, Boromir says they can't go over the mountains since it will be the death of the hobbits. And of course,
they had fewer hobbits.
They go through the Mines of Moria instead. And that's the death of Gandalf for now. A person who you would much rather have on the quest
than a hobbit
compared to fucking Pippin. You know, like that's
true,
the thing. It's like it seems stupid, like when you're watching it, and then what happens over the rest of the movie confirms. Yes, it would be stupid. Like it just no Merry and Pippin or Sam. I guess you can go over the mountains. You don't have to go through the mines of Moria. Gandalf doesn't die, etc. So yeah, it is slapdash. It seems kind of hasty and ridiculous, and as what happens in the actual movie, yes, that those fears are confirmed. Also, fucking Elrond, he just seems happy. He can get
get rid of him.
Yeah, get rid of him.
Yeah,
like
I mean, to be fair, like I feel like maybe there's the fact Elrond's like lived for he's lived for like 20,000 years. I'm trying to work out the timeline.
So he doesn't care about Middle Earth anymore then?
I'm kind of thinking like it's kind of just like fatigue. You honestly like, I mean, I genuinely think like in a way that's got to be part of it. Like imagine just living for that long. You're just like Sauron's still around. Like,
well, this
Elrond
would do
was
it,
fighting
though.
Sauron back when he was just a random lieutenant.
But you put the ring in the Mount Doom, then this ends it. This is the thing.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh well. Oh, I don't know. Like this will be it. This is like you're at the last minute of the fourth quarter. It's like this could be it.
I mean, to be fair, like I've always thought like Elrond's got to be thinking to himself like, why didn't I just push Isildur in the volcano?
That's what I thought as well. Yeah.
Just push him in there.
Yeah. I do think like. He is kind of like, well, that's sorted then, you know. I guess you guys are the Fellowship of the Ring now. Anyway, I'm off. Enjoy defeating Sauron, and in the background, you know, he leaves, and you can hear a car starting and tires screeching.
It's like a kind of mum being like, I pronounce you Fellowship of Cleaning the Kitchen, and then just goes and drinks some wine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit of a shit joke, but yeah, no, I like.
Sorry, I like to make relatable jokes for our mum audience, our middle-aged mum audience.
Yeah, but no, it is like that. It's just like, yeah, you're the Fellowship of the Ring. Well, glad that's sorted. Time to go on my vacation. Because he literally is going to another fucking island. So yeah,
he is.
That is what it's like for Elrond. So yeah, again, the whole thing. It does seem slapdash, like I said, and as we can see throughout the rest of the movie, that initial fear that I had does actually come to bear. So let's talk about Michael now.
Moria.
Well, yeah, we go through a stage where the characters are just like avoiding obstacles.
Yes, trying to get.
Yeah, like they're trying to get through the mountains.
First of all, the scary crows.
Yeah, the birds, which are the spies, of course, of Sauron. You know, and then eventually they go through the mines of Moria. Then before they go into the mines of Moria, you have a giant octopus monster that gets Frodo. Like this movie, you can say the same for every movie, but this movie in particular seems obsessed with like Frodo just getting like fucked around like quite a lot.
Yeah, that's
like,
true. Yeah.
Everything...
To be fair, I feel like Bilbo had these problems less, so you can't really blame Frodo for taking things like he's like, Bilbo, your adventure was nothing like this. I've been like attacked by a giant octopus.
Yeah, and then a fucking cave troll afterwards, and the orcs, and then the Balrog. It just like the level of threats just keep getting higher and higher. But anyway, what do you have to say about the mines of Moria thing, Mike?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, on the subject of Moria, because you mentioned something about Gimli in passing, and I figure seeing as we're talking about Moria, it's obviously where the dwarves live, and it's where Gimli.
Well, not anymore.
It's where the dwarves die. No, I've got a thing about Gimli, which I think is really interesting. So he's decidedly in this film a comic relief character, which is fine. I'm fine with that. He can be a comic relief character. But here's an interesting thing. You said it was like funny that he just tried to destroy the ring. What's interesting is that in the entire Lord of the Rings franchise, Gimli is the only character to ever try to destroy the ring. Like, and that's kind of like a massive thing because like nobody else, I think, obviously, this is spoilers, but obviously we know that Frodo doesn't actually try to destroy the ring. Nobody tries to destroy the ring, and yet Gimli, seemingly believing that his axe will destroy the ring, just goes for it. And this actually leads to an interesting thing about dwarves, which I just find interesting. I feel like it's something which, it's worth knowing when you consider that Gimli's generally just portrayed as kind of like a little bit of like a goofy kind of comic relief character. So as you already mentioned, there were 3 rings for the elves, 9 rings for men, 7 rings for dwarves. Now the interesting thing is that the 9 rings for the men, they obviously just fell under Sauron's command. The 3 rings for the elves, they didn't come under Sauron's command because the elf who was making them, because Sauron was working with an elf, worked out what Sauron was up to and secretly kind of made the rings so they wouldn't be under Sauron's command. But the 7 rings for the dwarves, they were just unambiguously like, there was no reason why the dwarves shouldn't have fallen under Sauron's command. And the reason why they didn't is just because dwarves seem to be completely impervious to Sauron's magic. And basically, lots of people have pointed out that actually it's probably true that Gimli would have been the best ring bearer, because the thing is, like, nobody really kind of noticed it within the context of the actual kind of story itself, but people afterwards looking at the events.
Okay, well, I'm going to get onto that later, Michael.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think that's interesting. But on the subject of Moria, on the subject of Moria more specifically, I think it is kind of like I think that kind of section, the whole section, both contains and is in itself one of the more kind of iconic moments of the Fellowship. I think when people think about the Fellowship, think, oh yeah, it's the one where they kind of go through Moria, because that's kind of like the big sort of action moment, I think. And yeah, I think overall it's kind of like, I think there's something just kind of awesome about the idea of like a massive underground kind of like city stroke mine stroke dungeon where like all these monsters and stuff. It feels very kind of RPG-y, which you've already kind of mentioned that thing. Yeah. But yeah, this particular section feels the most episodic.
So yeah, the orcs are just like, they can just live forever. They don't need food. They can just live.
That's a good question, actually.
I mean, that's what I thought. I was like, well, yeah. How long ago did the dwarves get defeated?
Yeah, well, actually, the one interesting thing is this film, Peter Jackson decided to have goblins and orcs be different things. I don't know if you noticed this, but
yes.
Obviously they have the big fact that the orcs, and then obviously they then get surrounded by goblins, and the goblins have kind of different eyes. That's how you can tell the difference. I would think maybe that the goblins kind of like are self-sustaining one way or another, and then maybe the orcs hunt the goblins. That's just a completely made up thing, though.
Okay.
But basically, because but it's worth noting in the kind of, as far as Tolkien is concerned, orcs and goblins are the same thing. But to be honest, I kind of like the idea of having, I'm a big fan of diversity, so I like the idea that they're different.
Yeah. But yeah, I will say the Moria thing, the Mines Moria, it is fun. It's just really fun stuff. You learn about all the characters.
They have a cave troll.
Yeah, the cave trolls, and the action is good. With Frodo and the sword lighting up. I like that bit. And
but actually, Frodo getting stabbed by the troll is kind of stupid, because
what you saying? It should just rebound off him.
Well, what I'm saying is it should have like broken his ribs. Like, I mean, it's kind of like the logic of it doesn't really, because it's kind of like, on the one hand, it seems like he kind of gets stabbed almost in the armpit. And you'd be like, okay, but then why would they even think he was dead? Because you don't, But then, assuming he got stabbed somewhere where he would be killed, it would break his ribs. And obviously, I say obviously.
Well, no, it could be like you know how a Formula One car, it hits like the barriers, and it's like they have these special Tech Pro safety barriers where like it absorbs the impact and like kind of pushes the car back out. Maybe the mithril or whatever the fuck it's called, the chainmail is like that.
Yeah, but definitely, I mean, the thing is, so in the,
in
the books, in the Ralph Bakshi version, definitely, he just gets stabbed. So there is a cave troll there, but Frodo gets stabbed by an orc, which makes a lot more sense, because obviously an orc would not have the, an orc could stab Frodo, and it wouldn't be expected like breaking, but yeah, definitely, I would not, armor or not, I wouldn't want a massive troll jamming me with a long pointy stick.
Yeah, but that's what should have happened. It should have rebounded off him. It should have hit him and just like not gone into his like body, and it should have just rebounded like with as much force as the troll hit it. That would make sense. And of course, it's a bit dumb that then Frodo like falls to the ground. It's like, well, you're not hurt, are you, pal? So what are you doing?
Yeah. What a drama queen. He just didn't feel like it. He was just like, you know what? I'm tired. I've had a lot going on recently. I'm just going to sleep here for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
But no, I mean, overall, I agree with you. It's an exciting scene.
Yes. So yeah, it is exciting, and of course, the scene culminates with "You shall not pass," which is I've seen some great memes over the years with like David De Gea in place of Gandalf. That's the Man United keeper. Maybe not so much in the recent years, but I definitely remember there was a stretch.
Hold on, it wasn't Van der Sar. He was like your really kind of like, he was the one who had like a record or something. Oh, that's
a good memory. Yeah, from the 2008-9 season, a record for most Premier League minutes without conceding a goal, like 1,100 minutes. But that was obviously 12 years ago. But yeah, in recent times, De Gea has had that meme, "You shall not pass," and just a load of footballs being pelted at him, and his head is on Gandalf's head. So that's fun.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's obviously an iconic line, great delivery from Ian McKellen, and I not much more to say than that. It's great, and like you said, it's probably the most famous moment from the movie. And of course, he dies, Gandalf. R.I.P. for now. But I do have to say,
yes.
What do you think I'm going to say?
I think you're going to say, what's the whole deal with them not being allowed to run out and grab Gandalf?
Exactly. They could have saved him. They could have saved him. Like, if Frodo runs to him and Boromir's like, no. And then Gandalf's just there for 5 seconds when it takes like a couple of paces to get him. And it's just like, no, you can't go across. Just have the bridge also crumble at the same time.
Yes.
So Gandalf just that's all you need to do.
Yeah, there's like so many things they could have done to make it work. Like, I mean, the other thing people have pointed out is like that obviously earlier on, during the staircase scene, which I'll give a shout out for being a really fantastic scene.
It is a fantastic scene. Yes.
But they have the whole thing of the goblins firing arrows at them. So lots of people have been like, well, just have the goblins be there firing arrows at them, and that would explain why it is they can't run out. But the thing is, obviously they don't have that. So it's kind of like there's lots of things they could have done to make it so that the Fellowship
Yeah.
can't run out to grab Gandalf, and yet they just decided to go with the old. They didn't feel like it.
Yeah, now
excuse.
obviously there's some great action scenes in the Mines of Moria, like the cave battling the cave trolls, the bridge, the crumbling and having to like jump across it. Oh, that's really good. But that bit, of course, it's an incredibly famous moment when Gandalf dies.
Fly, you fools.
Yeah, run, you fools. And he just he could have been saved, and you could have easily done stuff to prevent that from being the case.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, what I found interesting is that there's an explanation for why it is that Gandalf wanted to go down there, which is that Balrogs, just for the record, are literally supposed to be comparable in power to Sauron and Gandalf. Like, Balrogs are well,
it's
I'll
like
just say
the
they're
fucking
like
devil. That's what they are.
Yeah. They're like serious business, and therefore, like, people have said, well, Gandalf basically needed to make sure the Balrog was dead, so it makes sense from his perspective why he would want to go down after him. But yeah, it doesn't make sense why they wouldn't have been like.
Okay, so if he wants to go down, then why does he hang on?
Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. So there's not. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit dumb. But anyway, of course they get out of the Mines of Moria, Michael, don't they?
Yes.
And they go on to meet Galadriel, as I like to say. I don't really. That was just something I thought of. But anyway, yeah, it is like a... I've talked about F1 before a couple of minutes ago, but it is like a pit...
It's like a pit stop.
Yeah, it is like a pit stop for them. It's like, well, they've been through quite a lot, so let's get you some new equipment, let's feed you, let's get some good sleep. And and also we get some nice character development, particularly with Frodo, like what Peter Jackson said before about, you want Frodo to be the backbone of the story, and again, he very much is. And yeah, he realises he has to do this task alone. And we're going to skip a bit towards the end, of course, because we're going to talk about how now Sam accompanies him.
Yes.
And of course, that's what creates that powerful bond that is explored, of course, over the next two movies. Sam's insistent on being by Frodo's side. Frodo's like, no, I've got to do this alone. And Sam's like, no, you're not. Of course, it's epitomised in that line from Sam where Frodo says, I'm going to Mordor alone. Of course you are, and I'm coming with you.
Classic.
Like, yeah, there's no separating the two. Like, if Frodo's doing something, Sam is doing something as well. So again, I like that. Of course, like I said, that's explored more in the next two movies, because I was thinking that watching, you get a bit of Sam and Frodo, but that friendship isn't really there in this movie, which kind of makes sense, of course, because there's 9 of them in the Fellowship compared to the next two movies. It's literally just them two, and of course Gollum. But yeah, I just, back to what you said before, Michael, about this theory that the fans had. Well, why wasn't Gimli the ring bearer? Because Sauron's magic doesn't work on him. And this is a point I was thinking of. Like, I have to say, okay, I get, Sam and Frodo have to go alone because that's what's in the actual book, that they go off to Mordor by themselves. I don't know why Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn couldn't follow Frodo. Literally, this is what I was thinking when, they left on their own. None were attracted to the ring. Of course, Boromir was, and that's why, they had to leave Boromir behind eventually. At some point, it was going to happen. That's pretty clear. But Aragorn, he says it's fate, that's why Frodo has to go alone with Sam. And that seems like a bit of a cop-out. Yes, it was fate. That's why we can't follow them, because Galadriel said we couldn't. That seems to be the reasoning. And this is from Wikipedia. Fearing the ring will corrupt his friends, Frodo decides to travel to Mordor alone. Like I said, that's what it says on Wiki. Well, the ring... Why would he think the ring would corrupt Legolas? Legolas never showed any interest in the ring. Why would he think it would corrupt Gimli? Gimli tried to fucking destroy it, like you said.
Yes.
Like, why would the ring corrupt Gimli? Why would the ring even corrupt Aragorn, who at least
it's already shown that he.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We saw some scenes where the ring was calling Aragorn, and he literally fucking shut Frodo's hands. Like, no, it's yours. I'll follow you to Mordor. He says, I would have followed you. And I'm just like, well, why don't you fucking do it? What's stopping you? And of course, later on, Pippin and Merry get taken, so that's maybe the reason. But at that point, they hadn't. And I'm just sitting there, well, why? You can still do it, man. You're not, you're attracted to the ring, but you've just closed his hands. Clearly, I guess you could argue, well, maybe the longer he's next to the ring. Well, for now, it seems like he's pretty good. And of course, he's a very skilled fighter to have on your side. I just don't get, like, it seems to me like a complete downing of tools, from the Fellowship. It's like, we got to let the Hobbit, because it's better for the story. And it just seems to me to be a really weak point in this movie of just them giving up, basically. Well, the Fellowship's done, even though three of them, like I said, Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, the ones who were left, weren't attracted to the ring and could have continued with Frodo and Sam. That's just a really big issue I had, which just to me doesn't make any sense.
And of course, if Merry and Pippin were there as well, they would also have been allowed to go. And I think, so obviously, I guess once they'd realised that Merry and Pippin were gone, I can understand the logic of, well, we're going to go after Merry and Pippin because, that seems like a nice thing to do because they're going to get tortured and stuff, and that's pretty horrible.
I would argue, personally,
that it's worth
it to make sure the ring gets, Merry and Pippin getting tortured and dying. That's very sad, of course. But fucking Middle-earth is more important. You stick with the ring. You make sure these two little hobbits can get to fucking Mount Doom. That is more important. And of course, you could have maybe one of them, if they were really concerned about Merry and Pippin, one of them goes after them, and two stays with, Frodo and Sam. Yeah, something like that. But it's just so it's just so ridiculous. It is a real big flaw in this movie. In my opinion, Michael, go on.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the issues is kind of almost hearkening to a thing about Boromir, and I tell you what, it's also related to Thorin Oakenshield in Peter Jackson's version of The Hobbit. Peter Jackson doesn't actually seem to be that good at kind of like conceptualizing the reality of human greed in a way where it's kind of like human. So just as like a very quick reference, in Peter Jackson's version of The Hobbit, which I guess you probably haven't seen all the way through, there's a whole thing about how Thorin gets dragon sickness. So it's not like he's just becomes greedy. It's like he suffers from dragon sickness. I feel like it's kind of a thing where you kind of get the impression that Peter Jackson is not very good at just like showing how people can actually be, despite being kind of otherwise good people, can actually be greedy. And I think within that context, like the stuff about like Aragorn kind of confirming that he has absolutely no interest in the ring is stuff that Peter Jackson has added to make Aragorn come across as more heroic. But I think the issue with that is that it kind of means that it creates that plot hole. And obviously, so I think, my general assumption, like, I think within the context of the original source material, it makes sense, because I think there's no suggestion Aragorn wouldn't be inclined towards the ring. Legolas, I don't really mention it. And in Gimli, I think with Gimli, even though he shows that he's not interested in the ring by trying to destroy it, I think a lot of people are just like, oh, dwarves are greedy, even though,
wow, that's money. Racism. Yeah. So did Frodo not want to have Gimli because of racism? I kind of feel like that's it. Basically, like I think there's an idea that like the reason why people think that the dwarves really like the rings is because dwarves are greedy. But I think the thing is, dwarves in some sense they like the ring, but they only like the ring because of it being like gold and pretty and stuff. And orcs. Did I say orcs? Dwarves. But overall I agree with you. Within the context of the film, it literally makes no sense. And as I was watching it, I was kind of thinking to myself, I was going to bring it up.
I was thinking to myself it just. Like, imagine if they had gone with him and how different the film would be, because it's like so many kind of different obstacles and stuff. You feel like they would have been able to do it more. And I tell you what, I also thought, like, imagine if Frodo had actually just gone completely on his own. Like, that would have been ridiculous.
Well, obviously
like him just walking.
He died, which is why it's fucking, of course Sam helps to some extent, but it's why it's completely fucking stupid to send him on his own. Yeah. I mean, the only way this could have made sense if, like, Gimli maybe at the Fellowship was like, like, Boromir is making the case of why the people of Gondor, i.e. him, should have the ring. And Gimli makes the case, well, no, the dwarves should have the ring. He says something about dwarves, dwarf propaganda.
And that would explain why,
And that means, maybe Gimli...
And Legolas says, no, we should have the ring.
Yeah, with Legolas, because he's not really that character. He's kind of like, just, as you said before, like a badass who's just like, kind of a side character who's really good with the bow and arrow. I'm not sure...
And is racist against dwarves.
I'm not sure how you would make it so Frodo's like, nah, he can't be near the ring, but
exactly.
You need to do something. And of course, Aragorn, you could just remove him like shutting Frodo's hands and him accepting like, you know what, it's probably best to keep the ring away from me. Like he's not as far gone as Boromir, but he could see himself getting there maybe one day. So again, it's just sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, and the other thing is actually, just for the record, like, so I can kind of understand the logic of they don't want like an entire like an orc. A dwarf, an elf, and a man walking through Mordor. Walking through Mordor itself, because that might be a bit conspicuous. But like within that logic, because obviously, as you kind of know, maybe there's a while between like them getting across there until they're actually in Mordor. So you could be like, okay, we'll get you right to Mordor, and then obviously because you're small, you're kind of, because they have, I think, a line. I can't think where it is, but there's a line at some point in one of the films where it's like, he won't notice the small kind of pitter-patter of like hobbit feet, because you can kind of imagine that the hobbits would be easier at sneaking in there,
Yeah.
and therefore they wouldn't want to kind of like get right up to the mountain with all three of them there, because people are like, hold on a minute, why is that literal elf hanging around? But what they literally could have done is got them down to Mordor. Why do I keep saying? It's because I'm confusing Moria with Mordor. Got them right down to Mordor, and then been like, okay, dropping off Sam and Frodo. Now let's head off down to Gondor to make sure that that's okay. Boom, 2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah.
Rather than just completely separating.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, that would be what you would do in that situation. Yeah, if you were just, if the characters weren't dumb. But yeah, again, like you have to, again, I mentioned like Galadriel says it's like you have, that's why that scene with Galadriel is there with
Yeah. It's kind of like
to try and convince you, like, I know, because this all-powerful witch is saying Frodo needs to go alone. Okay, I guess it makes sense. Let's just remove like logic from your head.
It's like the Force defense in Star Wars. It's kind of like, well, it's because that's what I kind of think about with Faye. Which, to be fair, I mean, like, obviously with this high fantasy stuff, you can't exactly be like, you can't in the strictest sense say it's wrong. You can be like, well, I guess
I
maybe
can,
in this high...
because it's crucial to this movie, and it's very important, and it makes...
No, sorry. What I'm saying is, sorry, let me clarify. Okay, you can say it's something wrong with the film. What I'm saying is, you can't be like, so if somebody says the mystical fates told them to do it, you can't say no, it didn't.
Well,
you
that's
can
why
say,
it's
but
in
you
the
can
movie.
say it's a problem with the film.
Yeah, but that's
is what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's why they go to the fucking forest. So Galadriel says that, and so Frodo has this, like epiphany, I guess. And that,
and also because if the Fellowship of the Ring didn't break at the end of this film, they couldn't call it the Fellowship of the Ring.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
The second film would have to just be called the Fellowship of the Ring Part 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about somebody who, again, it was right for the Fellowship of the Ring to ditch eventually, although of course he was killed, which is Boromir. So,
yes.
okay.
More like borrow the ring,
yeah,
please.
Yeah, exactly. Such an interesting character, Boromir. Again, he's maybe like the 6th most important in that fellowship. Behind like a couple of the hobbits, like Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli. Although they're only important because of the previous movies. Sorry, the subsequent movies. Yeah, maybe he's like he goes up to number 4 in this fellowship if you had only seen this movie. But you still get such a sense of what he is and what he wants to do. It's genuinely great. Like, it is just such a fantastic character. Like, you can understand why he wants the ring, but then there's this selfish underbelly of wanting it, and of course, he tries to take the ring from Frodo, but then of course he saves Merry and Pippin. It takes 3 arrows to take him down, which I absolutely love. Like, he just won't go down. Such a complex and interesting character, and that emotional speech with Aragorn when he calls Aragorn his king, just like a great, a great character. So it feels so real as a character. That's all I wanted to say on Boromir. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I've said before that Boromir is like my favorite character, just because I think it's like a combination of one, like the fact he's kind of so strong, and like he is. I mean, the thing is, like, people talk about kind of like Legolas being a badass, but Boromir also is too, just in terms of like how kind of, obviously, I mean, you already mentioned it, the way he kind of makes his final stand. And then obviously, the kind of conflict he has. I guess like the conflict he has almost surrounding in a way like his sense of nationalism, because there's like a bit earlier on where he kind of like says that Gondor doesn't need a king, and it's kind of like, I think the reason he's saying that is because he thinks like that Aragorn isn't actually interested in defending his people, so he's kind of like thinking, no, I need to defend my people, I don't care what Aragorn has to say, I need to defend my people getting a ring. And then obviously,
maybe it's his ego speaking as well.
Yeah, as well, yeah. And then later on he kind of flips around, he's like, actually no, Gondor does need a king to come and protect them and keep them safe and stop it from falling. And I think like that aspect of kind of, he's not just kind of, he's motivated by a sense of kind of national duty, duty to his homeland.
That's part of what he's motivated by, which is why it's so great. It's part national duty and part just selfishness. But there is, with all his, like, of course, he picks up the broken sword of Isildur, and then he just like, wow, imagine, and then he just tosses it on the ground. Like, he's so like conflicted. And like, he's never completely sure of himself, but he's still like this great warrior. Like he's such a great character.
Yeah.
Like, I can see
I have
why he's your favorite.
I was just gonna say I have one minor quibble, but it's very small. I mean, obviously I like this character. But yeah, one thing is the handling of Boromir's dream is very understated. Is when obviously in the fellowship scene he stands up and says, "I had a dream of blah blah blah." And the thing is, like, in the actual book and the wider kind of narrative, the fact that Boromir has like a prophetic dream is a pretty significant thing. Like the fact that he's actually able to see into the future, and it relates to kind of like his relationship to kind of the gods of the Tolkien universe. I can understand kind of that not being included, but I've always thought, like, when I watch that scene, I'm always like, he just kind of like casually mentions it, like, I had this dream about like the world falling, world failing and stuff. It's kind of like he's kind of just saying it almost to himself, and you just think, well, like the fact that Boromir, it adds like another dimension to it because it kind of suggests he is in tune with almost basically like the spiritual world, which is something that's quite rare for men. So that makes him even more complicated. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
overall though, I mean, obviously, he's plenty. Yeah, he is complicated in a pretty good way. I think I will say like there are some moments where it kind of seems like the ring is almost enchanting him to the sense where it feels like it should maybe be a little bit more like kind of Boromir's own agency in terms of his priorities, whereas it feels like it's more just the ring kind of enchanting him. And I've always thought like sometimes in some scenes I thought, well, I'd feel like I'd like it a bit more if it was kind of like you felt like it was actually Boromir's sincere kind of like
well, that's what it is. It preys the ring. That's what the ring does. It preys on the weaknesses of people. So like Boromir is weak in terms of he clearly wants to defend his people, but he also like that there's their ego, like the desire for power underneath it.
Actually, I mean there is the fact. Sorry, the obvious other thing is that we haven't really mentioned this, but so the ring basically like is one, it's a power multiplier. So like more powerful people are more powerful with the ring, but also it's more kind of tempting and corrupting to powerful people. And I think the fact that we kind of mentioned how Boromir, like it takes 3 arrows to bring him down, I think that actually makes sense. And it's possibly true that Boromir is like, I mean, you think about, so for example, you could say actually Gandalf and Galadriel, of the two people we see kind of interact with the ring in any meaningful sense, are the most unwilling to touch it. And that's because they're actually probably the most likely to be tempted. And the only thing they've got going for them is that they're so good that they're like, they know. So they're like good enough to know that if they did touch it, they would want to use it. But their power means that they're drawn towards wanting to touch it. And I think obviously Boromir, I think by extension you could argue, is the most powerful member of the Fellowship. And that's obviously, apart from Gandalf, the most powerful surviving member of the Fellowship. And that would explain why he's so strong and why he's able to take all those arrows. And that also explains why he's so drawn to the ring, because he's thinking, I'm so powerful, I'm the kind of guy who can take like 3 arrows and still stay standing. If I had the ring, I could lead Gondor into battle.
I think you're putting the cart before the horse there, maybe, and saying the ring attracts itself to powerful people.
No, well, I mean, the thing is, it is, so there is like a, the reason why...
The ring does it itself. And the difference between like Boromir is he's weak. And the difference between Boromir and Gandalf, like when Gandalf refuses it, is Boromir is weak, Gandalf is not weak. He doesn't have that weak mentality, so that's why he refuses it. But the ring wants to end up in in powerful people's hands, basically. Yeah,
and I mean, definitely, like it's true. The ring would have been very happy if it had landed in the hands of if it landed in Gondor, because that's nice and close to Mordor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think
the ring knows geography as well. It's a pretty smart fucking ring.
Yeah, actually, it is a very smart ring. Where is its brain?
I don't know, but anyway, Michael, I think Boromir is good.
The only other thing actually is obviously in the later films you get like a massive battle kind of at the end. In this film, you don't really get a massive battle at the end. You just get this little kind of mini boss fight with Lurtz between against Aragorn, and I'll just say like
we're warming up.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was like a good indication of the things to come, and obviously, within the context of the later films, where you're going to see a whole army of Uruk-hai, which are basically like orcs on steroids. It's a good kind of hype builder. And to be honest, like I actually really do respect the film for not feeling the need, like especially looking at like Peter Jackson's kind of Hobbit films. It's even though it was far less appropriate for him to do so, he really obviously wanted to end with like massive battles at the end of all of his things, and here it's kind of like, this is nice and restrained, and I respect that.
Yeah,
you're just like,
I do respect that, and of course the fight between Lurtz and Aragorn, I think it's a bit shit, to be honest. How like Lurtz is like teasing Aragorn by having the fucking sword into his chest, like, haha, look, you can't do any damage to me, and then a second later Aragorn just chops his head off.
It is kind of, it's always actually surprisingly fast when I watch it nowadays. Oh, one behind the scenes fact, just because it's kind of funny. The actor who plays, when he throws the knife and Aragorn deflects it?
Yes.
The actor who plays Lurtz wasn't supposed to throw the knife. I think the story is that he was supposed to throw a prop knife that was made out of rubber rather than the actual knife he had, which was made out of metal, but he forgot and ended up throwing the metal knife. And then Viggo Mortensen, obviously the actor who plays Aragorn, actually in real life deflects the dagger. It's like in the behind the scenes. So well done, Viggo Mortensen. You're a real life Aragorn.
Yeah, no, literally he is. I read he also the crew liked Viggo Mortensen because he patched up his clothes as well behind on set. So there you go. There's something else. But just a couple of things before we conclude, Michael.
Yes.
Obviously, the music is incredible.
Beautiful.
Love the music. Yeah. Not much more to say than that.
Actually, wait. I've got something I want to. I've got a music box. I want to show it to you.
What do you mean you want to show it to me?
Keep talking.
God, I shouldn't have brought up the music.
Okay, get ready for this. There you go.
Ah, well, that's
what I think of the music.
That's a very nice. Yeah, that's a very nice thing. Yeah, fair play. And also, of course, the special effects. It's very interesting. There's a couple of times where I noticed this, where you have a wide shot, particularly in when Frodo was talking to Gandalf, and you have Elijah Wood on one side, and you have like a big Gandalf, which is obviously not Gandalf, like it's a prosthetic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. It's like for half a second you see him, and it's like I could tell that wasn't actually Gandalf. But yeah, most of the scenes, they just do it different camera angles. Like they have an establishing shot where you have like the back of obviously not the actual hobbits, like the dwarf stand-ins, I imagine, and and then you have the main characters standing fully upright, and then we cut back to close-ups of the hobbits and close-ups of like Galadriel, for instance, or Gandalf, and that's how it works. And
well, I mean, my favorite one, and I know they actually did this. I think they must not have done it much because it's so complicated. But I remember seeing this in the behind the scenes too. Basically, they had a thing where they literally make like one half of the room. So let's say a hobbit was stood in the background. They'd have the back half of the room be further away, and the front half of the room be closer. And then the crazy thing is they move the camera. And the way they did it is they made like a I can't think what the word is, like a dolly where the camera would move, and as the camera moved, it would also move the background so that it kind of stayed, looking, normal. But yeah, like with obviously, like I say, the Hobbit character.
All about perspective. Yeah.
I know, yeah,
all
it's
about
crazy.
Perspective. Also, Michael, I just want to say one more thing. What I do when watching these movies, I just like geography and knowing where stuff is because I'm quite sad. I follow along with the map, the Lord of the Rings interactive map. I remember doing it when I was when I first sat through and watched all these movies properly, like in 2014 or 2015.
Yeah.
And I remember it's about time I watched these properly, and I got up the map as well because I was interested, and I enjoyed following the characters. Oh, they're at this point here, because of course geography does play a big part in the actual story. So that's what I do when I watch it. So I know where everything is, and it is very interesting. I don't know if you do something similar.
No, yeah, I mean, so I kind of know the map well enough at this point. I actually followed the map when I read the books.
Okay, so that's how... No, I think I'm a bit sad that I follow on with the map. You're so sad with this that you actually know where everything is and you don't need the map. So, we're operating on two different levels here. Yeah. Anyway, so time to conclude now, Michael. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, why not? Okay. This film, like I say, I was kind of interested in as an adaptation. So obviously I really enjoy the source material, but I'm also kind of trying to think of it as an adaptation. I think in a way, my actual take is that I don't necessarily view this as kind of like a definitive version of the film. I think it's conceivable that there could actually be a version of this film that I would like more. But I do want to clarify that this is kind of very much coming from my own perspective, and I think this may be possibly the best possible kind of like commercially viable version of this film, because I think a lot of the stuff I would like would be stuff that would be adding in way more stuff from a kind of the extended lore and things like that, and it would be probably getting ridiculous, and I'm not even sure if it'd be practical. But in my head I'm like, well, there's a few things which I think I could possibly like more, so I don't view it as kind of definitive in that sense. I also have just another kind of issue, which is I remember seeing a while ago somebody was talking about kind of these films, and they were saying like the main problem with this is that like it's the Lord of the Rings presented by Peter Jackson, and they were saying like conversely, when you're watching a film, if you're interested in kind of filmmaking, it should be like Peter Jackson's version of Lord of the Rings. And I kind of feel like that's an area where, for example, I like the Ralph Bakshi version, whatever else you might say about it. It's very obviously like specific to Ralph Bakshi. Like Ralph Bakshi's artistry as a filmmaker shines through. Whereas in this film, it's kind of just like he just brings the story to life, which is fine. But from a filmmaking perspective, you could maybe say it could be a bit more kind of expressive. Overall, yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. But I mean, I don't know what you're expecting, but I'm actually going to give this film a middling 8. Yeah, I mean, maybe you thought I was going to give it a 9, but to be honest, no, I think like ultimately, while I enjoyed the story, I think it is kind of to some extent just a nice story. Like there's lots of really good stuff in it, but yeah, for me personally, it's a middling 8.
Yeah, I think that's quite fair. I will say there are some fundamental flaws in this movie, which is why it isn't perfect. The coincidence of how the story starts, the stupidity of the main characters in the formation of the Fellowship, and the issue with the Fellowship breaking up just because it makes for a better story. And that's the thing. Like, you can sometimes do things which don't make sense if the story is better, but like when it's it's the climax, it's the big thing that the movie is working towards, like the breakup. So, Frodo and Sam go on their separate way. Then it needs to make sense, and it just doesn't make sense, unfortunately. So yeah, that's that. But I will say, obviously, like we said at the start, Peter Jackson wanted Frodo and the ring, to be the backbone, and that it is the backbone, and it's why this story is really good, because you really understand Frodo as a character. Him. I love the scene in Rivendell where he's like, "Nah, this is too much adventure for me," and then he's like, "No, I'm still going to do it." That's a very nice character development going on there. When a worse movie would just have him like, no, I want to continue this adventure and not have any of the, the grounded reality, or him talking about the grounded reality of going on this adventure. And, basically, like I said, it ends up being a sacrifice for Frodo, which I think is the crucial thing here. And of course, we talked about Boromir. He's a great character as well, his development too. And yeah, I think, of course, I haven't seen Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, but a worse adaptation of Lord of the Rings would be you don't have this backbone of the story that Peter Jackson instilled, and it is just kind of like, it's kind of more all over the place. It's more spread out. Like, it's just characters. It's kind of like how the Phantom Menace was to a certain extent. How you look at the Phantom Menace and there's like, well, there isn't really a protagonist of that. Of course, that was the big Plinkett criticism, which is true. There's not really a protagonist of the Phantom Menace. Just it's an ensemble cast, a historical epic. Well, it's a sci-fi epic, Star Wars. All these people doing all these different things, all these characters. How do they mix into the story? It's interesting, but you need like a protagonist to add. I'm going to use that word again, a backbone. So it all comes back to this person, and of course, this movie has this adaptation of Lord of the Rings has this with Frodo. And again, The Phantom Menace did not, and that's why it wasn't such a good movie. But this one does, and that is absolutely crucial. And so, yeah, that's what makes it, this part, of course, decent. But it is only decent. I have to say, it is not incredible. I mean, I don't know. When we review Two Towers and the Return of the King, we'll see how they rank. But yeah, this is just getting an 8 out of 10 for me, which is still decent. Still give it a watch. But not the greatest movie ever. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Michael, what are we doing next week?
Well, we are reviewing the fantasy action adventure epic. I don't think epic's too strong of a word. Jerry Maguire.
Fucking Jerry Maguire. So yeah, that's for the start of the NFL season, of course. How could we forget?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's useful for me to know, so I can forget it by the time we get around to actually reviewing it.
Anyway, we have been selecting and reflecting on Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Michael has loved this. He's loved every second of it. This is Michael's birthday, and Christmas come to life. All in one. That's what I meant. Join us next week for Jerry Maguire. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.